Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Just to make sure we are counting down. Looks like we are. So, looks like everything is good to go. Today, we are returning to my favorite segment, which is the weekly Hasbro review video. So, today, we are on the WWF Hasbro's Series 4. Now, this is the second release back in 1992. Now, as I said back in Series 3, it is the first time in 1992 where you did get multiple releases in one year. So, as you know, Series 1, 1990, Series 2, 1991, and then you got multiple releases, Series 3, Series 4 in 1992. And then once you dive into Series 5, 6, and 7 in 1993, and then Series 8 through 11 in 1994. So you get your first of multiple releases this year. Now, if you were to ask me as a kid, the Hasbro line ended with Series 4. This is the last line of figures that me and my brothers had as kids. Now, obviously, we did not have all of these figures. We only had 3 of these pieces. And, as I've talked about in the past, I did not break these down by series. Talking about them as, Jake Roberts was a Series 1 figure. Hacksaw Jim Duggan was Series 2. Coco Beware was Series 3. This is a foreign concept to me. Breaking these down by series releases is something that I consider to be as an adult collector. I wasn't realizing that these were individual releases as a child. In fact, I've talked about before. I didn't know that these figures were made by Hasbro as a kid. I wasn't calling them Hasbro when I was young. I didn't know who made these figures. I didn't know who made these kids until what was it, 2021, something like that, 2020. So it had been a long time, a long later in life before I finally realized the proper name for these particular figures. So so Series 4 to me has a special meaning. Now, yeah, even though they were figures that came later on in life, so they were figures obviously I can remember the most because I was older when we did receive these figures, and I can remember play with them a lot better. But here's the thing: even though they came later on in life, and I had them for the least amount of time, even though we had Series 1 figures a lot longer, even though we had the Series 2 figures a whole lot longer, I can honestly say that we had as much use or as much play with the Series 4 figures, and I might even argue probably utilize the Series 4 figures more than all the other figures. Almost, I would say almost as much. I don't know if I would necessarily say that all of the figures from Series 1 and 2 combined were were necessarily used less than these 3 figures from Series 4, but these 3 figures that we had from Series 4 were definitely the most utilized figures ever. So, Series 4 is a very small line in comparison to the rest of the series releases. So, Series 11, I think, had 7 figures, and Series 7 excuse me, Series 11 had the smallest amount of release figures, but Series 4 with 8 figures, the second smallest release. And we're going to start off with obviously the highlight of this collection, which is Bret the Hitman Hart. So, Bret Hart on card. There are a couple pieces that, if you are a mint on card collector, that you want to pay close attention to. One, obviously, is the main piece that you're going to be looking for, which is the pink heart. Now, Bret Hart on card, pink, you're probably going to pay maybe $300 for that. If you do happen to find the purple heart, that is a variant of this figure, and the purple heart is going to run you a whole lot more expensive. You might end up spending $300-$400 for the purple heart variant. The Bret Hart comes with the Heart Attack. So Bret Hart. Now, all the figures that we're going to be looking at over here, these are all spares. So condition might vary. They're not taken from my main display. I would argue that Bret Hart is arguably an absolute perfect figure. And here is the argument I would make between a Hasbro Bret Hart compared to, let's say, an LJN Bret Hart. Now, you look at an LJN Bret Hart, and I say, well, LJN Bret Hart, I probably classify as, let's say, my number 13 favorite LJN figure of all time. But I also make the argument that the LJN Bret Hart is an absolutely terrible figure. It is. LJN Bret Hart is horrible. It's a bad figure. He is basically a small uppercut punch figure, and that's basically it. If he was basically a Bob Orton figure or Harley Race, basically somebody I didn't watch growing up or didn't know anything about, he would be somewhere probably in the bottom 10, bottom 15 of the LGN figures. Color is so and so, not exactly, flashy, but he is in the top 15 among my top favorite figures of all time among the LGNs simply because of namesake. But you move over to Hasbro and you look at the Bret Hart Hasbro figure, absolute perfection. Fighting pose is absolute perfection. I go back to the Series 1 Jake Roberts, and I talk about the separation of the legs, right? And I mentioned that with the separation of the legs and the way that the feet kind of give you like that perfect kind of like that little kick that Jake has. And I think that is absolutely splendid. I love the separation of the legs and that boot, that little kick that Jake Roberts gives you. And I think the Bret Hart figure mimics that look of the Jake Roberts beautifully. I also go back to the Series 3 Hulk Hogan. I argue that that could be one of the most perfect wrestling action figures ever. Bret Hart is basically another Series 3 Hulk Hogan figure. So because yes, this is a figure from childhood, and this is probably the number one most utilized action figure of all time. Let me backtrack that statement. The most utilized toy, it doesn't necessarily have to be wrestling related, but the most utilized toy of my life, it was a wrestling figure. It was the WCW Galoob Sid Vicious figure because I use that with everything. The Galoob figures work beautifully with the Hasbros, and because Galoob was basically unbreakable figures, the Sid Vicious had the perfect fighting pose. The Sid Vicious figure to me was the most perfect figure ever. So Sid Vicious was my most utilized figure ever. But Bret Hart. Bret Hart against Sid Vicious. Bret Hart against The Undertaker. And when we were kids, it was a dream match to have Bret Hart against The Undertaker. And this was long before in real life Bret Hart ever had real life competition against The Undertaker. Now, I don't know when Bret Hart and The Undertaker had their first real life battle, but as kids, we used to have Bret Hart Undertaker matches all the time, and we used to ponder what a real life competition between the two would have looked like. And when they eventually did have the real life bout, that was not a disappointment at all. I still say that the Series 8 Bret Hart is the superior figure because of overall paint scheme and design, but you could sit there and say, well, Yokozuna is my favorite Hasbro. Series 3, Ultimate Warrior number 2, Series 8 Bret Hart number 3. Now I can cheat and say Series 11 Yoko is 1B, and maybe series for Bret Hart is like 3B for favorites. But again, I kind of feel like that's cheating. I don't want to do that. So where would I rate Series 11 Yokozuna if I don't put it at 1B? Where would I rate this if I don't put it at 3B, etc.? I don't know. I haven't exactly done that breakdown, but perfect figure. Kind of talking about the Purple Heart. I've decided I am not going to stop these videos at 11 series. At the conclusion of series 11, I am going to come back with both a 12th and a 13th video. I am going to come back and I'm going to look at both the prototypes as well as the mail away figures for a 12th video. I'm also going to come back with a special series 12 unreleased video. Yes, I have made all of these videos in the past, and if you're interested, you can go back in through the archives and look at my Hasbro folder and look back at those old videos, and if you want to go back and watch those. Otherwise, if you're patient and you just want to watch these new videos, you can do that as well. Whichever is you're more interested in. But Bret Hart against The Undertaker, Bret Hart against the British Bulldog against The Undertaker. Those matches, those one-on-one matches were legendary. We had so many fun matchups against those guys. Like I said, Sid Vicious was always predominant. With Hasbro, we actually had one-on-one matchups, and they were splendid. Sid Vicious was always part of those matchups, one-on-one battles, part of Royal Rumbles, incredible. Like I said, they Series 4 came out when we were a little bit older, and we were still probably playing with these when I was still probably like 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, maybe. And it's one of those things where they kind of sat in our drawer, and you walk around the house, you're bored, you got nothing to do. Maybe you sit down at the table and you pull out the figures, and maybe you bat them around for 10 minutes or so. It didn't have to be anything flashy. It just something to pass the time. This particular figure will always mean the world to me. And like I said, Bret Hart will always be one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. His action figure was absolute perfection. If you did have one, if you did have one complaint about the figure, maybe it's because he's kind of like looking up in the air. Now there is one custom from an eBay seller, Denver Moore, where he's kind of like got his jacket off. He's kind of like doing where he's enters the ring and he's kind of doing that. It kind of makes sense, and that look works beautifully. One of my favorite commercials. You got this little kid in the tunnel, and he's watching Bret Hart walk down the tunnel, and he screams down the tunnel. He screams out Bret's name. Bret turns around, walks down the tunnel right back to him. Go get him, champ. Bret takes off the sunglasses, puts them on the kid. And I'm like, man, that lucky SOB. I wanted to be that little kid. I think most of us wanted to be that kid when we were young. I think we all wanted to be those kids at ringside when Bret, walked around the ring and put the sunglasses on the kids on the outside. That was so amazing. Probably one of the top three heavyweight champions of all time, at least in my opinion. Yes, Hogan will always be number one. No one will ever surpass him. I mean, who do I rate number two? Shoot, I don't even know. Maybe Bret Hart is my all time favorite number two heavyweight champion. He's definitely my favorite Intercontinental champion ever. But Bret Hart, I mean, he's a good $20 figure. Almost any condition, Bret Hart is still a $20 figure. Mint condition, I mean, you're probably getting a good $25 to $40 figure. It's a fantastic piece, and he's got a nice uppercut punch like Roddy Piper and a bunch of other figures. So it's a fun piece, perfect for display. And you know what? If you're giving it to your kids, or hell, if you're a grown adult and you want to go back to those childhood memories, you want to wrestle these guys yourselves, go for it. Nobody's stopping you from having fun with these guys today. relive those childhood memories. It's just a fun piece. One thing about the I was talking about the Purple Heart. One thing about the Purple Heart though, because you do have that variant on card, if you do find a Purple Heart loose, here's the tough thing: the Bret Hart mail away did come with a Purple Heart. So the question is, if you find a Purple Heart loose, is it a mail away figure or is it a legitimate variation in the series for Bret Hart figure? Because anybody could sit there and say, hey, this is a mail away figure. And that, even out of the baggie, it's still going to hold so much more value. But, a loose Series 4, on card, it's going to sell for more. I mean, it's going to net you $60 to $100 probably for those who are looking for that variant. But an actual mail away, even loose, will probably get you a few $100s, right? But if somebody has like an actual Series 4 that came off the card and they claim that it's a mail away, I mean, who's to tell them that they're wrong? So that's the tough thing. Uh, this next figure we're gonna look at, I've had I have fits about this figure. The one we're gonna talk about is the Undertaker, and Undertaker comes with Tombstone Tackle. Now, the Undertaker will always be in my top 10 most favorite Hasbro figures of all time, no matter what. I absolutely love this figure. Now, yes, when I do my countdown, or a few years ago when I did my countdown of top 10 favorite Hasbros, I put the Series 8. I put the Series 8 Undertaker up there with a special shout out to the Series 4. And it's just because Series 8 is more valuable than Series 4. Series 8, you're looking at like an $80 figure, where Series 4 is like a $20 figure, right? So, and again, when it comes to these figures, value should not play a value, should not play a role, but you're still thinking about that. So I kind of have like a sort of love hate relationship with this figure. And, and even the hate is sort of a strong wording for this figure. Well, let's start off with the hate relationship. Well, why do I have a hate relationship with this sort of figure? And it starts with the arm, and it's the reason why I did not like the right extended arms on the Hasbro figures for such a long period of time. Now today, I absolutely love the right extended arms. I think that the right extended arms are some of the best Hasbro figures. But when I first started collecting the Hasbros, I wasn't a fan. And for it, there's a particular reason. So, very playable, right? I love the clothesline. I love the fact that you can close it up, do punches, do a absolute beautiful body slam, right? Whether you're doing it from the right side or from the left side, you can always get the person up in a beautiful tombstone. This was a fantastic and absolute perfect playable action figure. Always get them in that choke slam. So much fun. I've had so much fun playing with this figure. As a kid, Bret Hart or Undertaker. I mean, it was a toss up. I mean, which one did I love more? Bret Hart against the Undertaker. I mean, it's when I was doing the my favorite Hasbro tournament. It really was a question as to which one of those two figures were going to win, and sadly, neither one of those were my winners. And I really thought it was gonna come down to one of those two. For nostalgia's sake, it had to be one of them. I mean, who else could have possibly won? The two figures I had the most enjoyment with, the two figures I had the most play with, the most fun, the most fondness, the most memories. But the one downside with The Undertaker, and the reason I didn't like the extended arms, eventually, with enough play and enough usage, eventually the right arm, the arm did break off. So this part of the arm did pop off. So all you were playing with was basically this part of the arm. So the whole glove part was gone. And yes, even with the busted arm, we were still playing with this guy and we were still having a lot of fun. But it was annoying. And I can understand a lot of kids like you maybe Hulk Hogan with the open hands, right? The Series 1 Hulk Hogan, right? With the Hogan Slam. Maybe he had busted fingers and stuff. I don't remember any of our figures having broken fingers or anything like that. But the only thing I could ever remember breaking, I definitely remember Undertaker having the broken arm. I'm pretty sure some of our figures maybe have broken arms, maybe something had a broken leg. I'm trying to think back some of the figures, but man, such a long time ago. But I'm thinking maybe something from Series 1 or Series 2. I'm pretty sure probably a couple of those figures had broken pieces, but the Undertaker was really the one that stood out, and that was a shame. You're talking about one of the greatest figures from Hasbro, and that was terrible. For a play standpoint, losing one of your favorite pieces, but the figure has that nice big strong arm, great solid look. And here's the thing, man. As kids, we're always losing accessories. I cannot remember a single accessory that we had ever. I don't remember ever having a hacksaw. I don't ever remember having uh, a guitar. I don't ever remember having a snake. So it's like, shears. All of those figures that we had with the accessories, I don't know what happened to any of that stuff. So Undertaker with built on hat, I love that. LGN, Hasbro, all of these figures that come with built ons, I am perfectly ecstatic about that. And sometimes today you look at figures like Undertaker, for example, and sometimes you'll see the hat kind of like chipped off, and that sucks. But I'd much rather have the built on than without it. Great figure. Again, one of the top 10 best Hasbro figures easily. And if you're a child, I mean, how could you not have the Undertaker? And it's odd that you'd see like Bret Hart and the Undertaker both released in Series 4, and double it. You see both figures released in Series 8 again, so that was pretty interesting. So such a great piece. And Undertaker again, just like Bret Hart. I mean, he's like another $20 figure. I think most of the time I get about $15 for this piece. Very rarely you might get about 25 if it's a mint or near mint figure. But Undertaker usually hovers around $15. Let's say between 15 to 25 bucks for a piece like this. Now, as I said, Hasbro in Series 4 came out with 8 figures. We only had 3 of them. The last piece that we did have was the British Bulldog. And if we are going to have 3 of those figures, I'm glad it was these 3 figures. This one is, I don't know if this is a Spanish card. I'm assuming that this is Spanish, but Davy Boy Smith. And this is what I'm talking about with figures like this, right? So growing up, Series 1, Hulk Hogan. Series 2, Ultimate Warrior. And then the Series 4, British Bulldog. All of these figures had the exact same pose, right? Series 1 Hogan, for the longest time, that was my favorite Hulk Hogan figure. Up until I started collecting, I didn't know about any other Warrior figure. Series 2 Ultimate Warrior was my favorite. Grapplers and Gimmicks have been coming out with a million different British Bulldog figures, and they've been doing amazing work. And like I've said, their figures are the closest to Hasbro than any other toy line. And as many of their figures, as many Bulldog figures that they come out with, I've enjoyed their pieces, but to me, there is only one Hasbro. There's only one toy line that really hit the mark. And I will always say that this particular figure, there is only one Davy Boy Smith, and this is to me the premier British Bulldog figure. Now, I never knew about Tom Billington. I never knew about the British Bulldogs as a tag team. Obviously, I was way too young, didn't grow up watching the tag team in the 80s. So when I think about the British Bulldog, I only think about one single member, one single character, and this is my British Bulldog. One of my top 10 all-time favorite wrestlers ever. And this was such a fun and enjoyable piece. And yeah, like The Undertaker and like Bret Hart, this is one of the most utilized figures ever. Now, obviously we didn't have the most Hasbro figures ever. Like I said, I think I counted them out. We said we had like 17 Hasbros and 7 Galoob figures, right? So we had to obviously use other pieces, other toys for play, or, especially if we're doing like Royal Rumbles and stuff. So other things got utilized for our matches, and Panthro from Thundercats, or Jackalman from Thundercats, or a couple other guys from Thundercats. What was a big lion guy that had the big long arms? Like that guys like that. But Panthro, that was a guy that got used like crazy. So he was like one of the major wrestling figures that we utilized. Uh, Harry and from Harry and the Hendersons got a major push. With the bendable King, what was it? Yeah, the bendable Incredible Hulk figure. So there were other pieces that we utilized a lot, and they all had matches against these guys, and it was just so much fun using those pieces. And like when I think about Panthro, for example, going up against like Sid Vicious against British Bulldog, etc. Those matches were fun. Tag team matches, individual matches, Royal Rumble battles. 1992, Bulldog defeats Bret Hart. So yeah, there were. I think even before then, I think Bret Hart and Davey Boy were having a lot of play in our house. And then after that, even more so, Bulldog was giving even more pushes. I think we were already using Bulldog defeating Bret Hart in a lot of those matches. And they would always go like back and forth. After a real life battle, when he became Intercontinental Champion, yeah, they would continue to go back and forth with matchups. So I don't think we ever had like actual belts that we created or anything like that. It would just be like, whoever won type of deal. At least I don't remember actually having like Intercontinental Champions, Heavyweight Champions, or anything like that. I'm sure we did. I just don't recollect that. But when I look at this figure and I look at like the Warrior and I look at Hulk Hogan, I'm like, when I look at today's figures and I look at like Zombie Sailors, who I don't recommend. I mean, their figures just suck. But that's not about today's video. But I look at like Matt Cardona from Series One, open hands, right? And I look at all these different figures with the open hand pose and whatnot. Um, yeah, I don't mind those figures. I don't mind the open hand pose anymore. I mean, by today's standards, yeah, I definitely gravitate towards the closed fist for punching and whatnot. But because I'm so accustomed to playing with the figures with the open hands and utilizing those as punching hands and whatnot, I have history playing with these figures and enjoying them and having so much fun with them. So it's like I have that history. So yeah, I'm okay with it when I see new figures come out with this particular look. So I guess I'm not so blinded and in need of having closed fists all the time. But British Bulldog, definitely one of my favorites. Uh, I guess if I was doing another countdown, he'd probably be another top 20 piece for me. Oddly enough, British Bulldog is not a valuable figure. Like whenever I try to list this figure, I might get maybe $10 for it. Sometimes even less than that. And I just think it's because it's such a common figure that everybody has a British Bulldog. So whenever you try to list it, it's like Greg Valentine. Everybody has a Greg Valentine. So even if you list these figures and they're mint or close to mint, nobody's trying to pick those figures up because everyone has them. So it's really hard to sell. And you might be able to buy them on auction. You buy them on auction for a few bucks. So if you think that you're gonna try and buy them and resell them, it's just not gonna happen. But it's a fantastic figure. Like I said, it's one of my favorites, and a lot of history with the British Bulldog. But I generally think the British Bulldog should essentially be about a $15 figure. I think that's about its value. And that's the last of the figures that I personally had from childhood. The rest of these figures I've only learned about, obviously, as an adult collector. This one right here is a bit of an oddity. First one is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. So this one I can never keep in one of those ringside collectibles protective cases because how long his name is on the bottom. They obviously situate the figure much higher on the card, so you can't put him in a case. It's just too high up, and that sucks. And this is, I don't know, maybe a French card or something. So yeah, because this is a French card, you can't. I don't know what it says on here. Back card backing. So anytime I kind of look at this figure and I look at like the LJN Ricky Steamboat where he's in all black pants, I know everybody loves that LJN, but like that LJN to me is so plain and simple, bad pose. Like it's to me the LJN Ricky Steamboat is it sucks. I don't like it. When I think about Ricky Steamboat, like this is my Ricky Steamboat. This is how I remember Ricky Steamboat from childhood. I remember him in this getup. I remember him coming into the ring and blowing that, the fire straight up into the air. So when I think the dragon, this is the dragon to me. And I love his accessory. And oddly enough, even with accessory, you would think that this would be like a $40 figure, but no, man, this is a very common figure. And generally on most on most people's auctions, most sellers' auctions, you could probably get this figure for $15 to $25. Like it's not an expensive figure at all. I mean, without accessory, you could probably get it anywhere between $5 to $15. Because I don't think many people had this figure from childhood, or if they did, they probably didn't play with it. Like I don't think I've ever. Yeah, I'm just thinking about it right now. I have probably owned maybe 50 Ricky Steamboat Hasbro figures, and I can't think of a single one where it didn't appear either mint or at least close to mint condition. So I'm wondering, has anyone ever actually played with the Ricky Steamboat from childhood? I don't know. And like I look at the Giant Gonzalez. He's another perfect example. The Giant Gonzalez is an absolute perfect figure, like easily one of the top 10 greatest Hasbro figures ever made. But it doesn't look like anybody ever played with the Giant Gonzalez because you look at his figures and all of his figures are always perfect. Strong arms, perfect action, no paint loss. I'm like, has anybody ever played with that figure? Plus, I like the fact that his accessory it's nice and strong, right? Plus, when you take it out, it basically serves dual purposes. So whether you wear the cape up or you wear the cape down, it's multifaceted, so it looks good both ways. It doesn't matter, and it's one of those few times where the fused legs actually looks good for the particular figure. Again, my resin LJN custom, which has this look, one of my favorite resin or one of my favorite LJN figures because it's based on this particular look. Never even knew this figure existed. Again, I'm only going off figures that I knew of from childhood based on what I particularly owned. And I never sat there and I never studied the back of the cards to my knowledge. And it's possible we probably could have sat there and be like, oh, yeah, boss man. Oh, yeah. But it's doubtful, man. I don't know who was sitting there, tearing the bubble off the card and whatnot. Was my mom or someone like opening up the package and handing us the figures? Was like my older brother sitting there and ripping off the ball off the package and being the first one to sit there and inspect it. I don't know. I don't remember all that. But this is a nice, fun figure. I mean, like I said, if you're a kid, I mean, this is a solid piece. Great arm positioning, right? This would make a fun, playable figure. So I think Ricky Steamboat is an enjoyable piece. Great for any collector, and it's affordable. So, all right. So, as we know, Hasbro released 5 sets of tag teams on 2-pack over the course of 2 series. In Series 2, they released 3 out of the 5 sets with the Bushwhackers, the Rockers, and Demolition. And Rockers were an epic fail, in my opinion, overall. The quality of the figures are probably the worst of the bunch. Probably the worst set of figures from Hasbro in general. But Demolition were amazing. Bushwhackers, great look, but the way that the legs and the way that they stand makes the figures even worse. But Series 4. The Series 4 tag teams were absolutely out of this world amazing. I still classify Series 3 as producing the strongest output of figures. I don't think any other series of the entire Hasbro line comes close to producing the quality that Series 3 produced. But Series 4 in general is so freaking close. They are definitely very high on the list of high quality figures. And that includes their 2 sets of tag teams. That includes The Undertaker. That includes British Bulldog. And yes, that definitely includes Bret Hart. Now, once you get to Series 5, I think Series 5 is definitely one of the weakest series. In fact, if it wasn't for Series 1 and 2, I think Series 5 will probably be the weakest lineup of figures produced by Hasbro. So next week when we talk about Series 5, you'll see exactly what I mean. In Series 4, we get our first tag team, which is Legion of Doom. And they did not disappoint, not one bit. with these figures. So for Hawk, you get the Hawk attack, and from Animal, you get Doomsdayer. That's kind of lame. So I don't really, again, because I don't really pay attention to a lot of, well, sometimes I do, but a lot of these tag teams, once I purchase these figures, I stop paying attention to what they go for because I no longer need them. Now, with the loose figures, yeah, I kind of stay in touch with the market because I sell a lot of loose figures, but what do they sell for on card? I'm not buying mint on card for resale purposes, so I don't really focus on that. But like the Legion of Doom, when I was buying them, were easily hovering between $350 to $500 when I was buying them. Are they still in that bracket? I would probably say so. Maybe not $500. I would probably say if you were to go out and buy Legion of Doom today, you're probably going to be in the $300 range. So I would say be comfortably between 250 to 350 would be a reasonable expectation if you're expecting to buy these figures mint on card. Loose figures, I really don't care what the condition of the figures are. They could have a bunch of missing spikes. They could have weak arms. There could be paint loss. When it comes to loose Legion of Doom, I kind of set the bar at $40. They could be mint condition figures. They could have, like I said, they could have all the deficiencies I just mentioned. I generally say $40 is the bar. I will always sell Legion of Doom for $40. It seems like that's the going rate for Legion of Doom figures. So when you get on Macari and you get on eBay and people are selling these figures for $50, $60, $75, they're not going to sell for those prices. Occasionally, yeah, on eBay I might list it $50 by best offer because I know somebody's gonna come in with the best offer and maybe I'll sell it for $40. I'm hoping that somebody comes in for the best offer for like 45 and I make a few extra dollars, but reasonable expectation is it's gonna sell for $40. But the one thing I really appreciate about these, and with Hawk, here's the funny thing. I always buy these auctions, right? Because I gotta increase my inventory, and people are always reaching out to me. Hey, do you have this available and that available? And and so when someone reaches out and they let me know what they're looking for, I try to go out and find that item so that I'll have it on hand. And that way, if they reach out to me in the future, hey, I got this thing that you're looking for. And generally, I don't sit there and try to price gouge anybody. I'll basically sell it to them for what I paid for it. If they're looking for an animal and I paid $40 for it, hypothetically, I'll sell it to them for the $40. Maybe I'll sell it to them for 45. Let's say $5, finder's fee or something, just so that I can say, hey, I turned a profit type of deal. But that's never gonna happen. You're not gonna need help finding an animal. But but point being, I always find these auctions and I will always find an animal, but for whatever reason, Hawk is so elusive. Why is that? I've bought and sold a million Legion of Doom figures, and like I said, I sell them for $40. That's the bar. That's the going rate for Legion of Doom, and and I will always have like these extra animal figures laying around, but I always got to go out and try to find a spare animal or a spare hawk because everybody is selling animal. Nobody's got hawk available. And I don't want to sell Animal by himself because everybody wants the tag team together. So I like the fact that when they created Legion of Doom, that they didn't just sit there and mimic each other, or maybe even, maybe one figure has like a fighting pose like this, and maybe the other has a fighting pose like this. Yeah, I like the fact that they gave each figure their own unique fighting pose. So I like that a lot. The only downside with this particular figure is the fused legs. But you take that away, this is a fantastic playable figure. And I like the built on chest plates and everything, right? Yes, the spikes do sometimes break. Yes, the spikes do sometimes have like either red or possible white paint bleed or possible chips at the top. I got it. Whatever. It happens. But these are gorgeous pieces. And when you look at guys like the Nasty Boys and Legion of Doom, it's like, man, you know how difficult it is to keep those tag teams out of your top 10 favorite Hasbros? That is impossible. But it's but it is possible because Hasbro is just so deep in amazing figures. And we go back to open hand figures, but that's fine. Great, Animal always has amazing face paint. I think in Remco, I think Remco is the only time I've ever looked at the Road Warriors Legion of Doom and thought maybe Hawk was a better figure than Animal. Just slightly. I mean, yeah, he does have a little bit more face paint, but not a whole lot more. Not because you have like massive amounts of difference in face paint, right? Where the face paint is just slightly, just a very minimal difference. But on the Remcos, I mean, it's almost it's a very minimal change. Where here you got like a big massive difference. But when you look at like LJN and or the custom LJN figures, when you look at like from the Asylum Wrestling Store and you look at their Remco style figures, and when you look at Hasbro and you look at like Jack specific wrestling superstars or basically any of these different lines that have created Legion of Doom figures, the paint is always superiorly different for the two figures. So I only had Rockers as a tag team from childhood, right? And that sucks because yeah, I enjoyed the Rockers from childhood, and that was amazing to have those guys. They were arguably my favorite tag team or one of my favorites. But I've always classified Legion of Doom as my favorite tag team, and these particular figures, oh my freaking god, I would have found a way to hold on to these guys possibly my whole life. And even after I left for the army and everything, I would have found a way to keep these guys, as part of my collection because freaking Legion of Doom, man. Mm. All right, and of course, talked about Legion of Doom, and the last of it are the Nasty Boys. So Brian Knobs comes with the Nasticizer, and Jerry Sags comes with the Punk Pounder. But again, here are your figures on card, and pretty much the same thing. Anytime you look at Demolition, you look at the Nasty Boys, or you're looking at Legion of Doom, you're basically got to kind of have this mindset that these figures are normally going to be in about the $350 to $500 price range. Are they still today the same general vicinity in price, mint on card, as they were, a year or 2 years ago? Probably not, but as long as you keep that in mind, that they're probably going to be hovering around $400, if you could find them for like let's say 250, it's like man, I'm thinking $400. Here's one for 250. Let me jump on it. It's gonna be an awesome price, right? Nasty Boys. Nasty Boys are again two of the greatest figures from the freaking Hasbro line, and these figures give me such fits as a seller. Let me tell you. So story time here. As a seller, I've told this story numerous occasions, and it's kind of infuriating. Uh, as a seller on eBay, so around 2022 ish, let's say, I talked about Mabel Toys. Andrew Todd Martin, one of my all time favorite sellers on the platform. I have literally built my entire my Hasbro collection, or a good portion of it at least. Heck, I've probably built my entire Hasbro collection, a majority of it, and I've even probably built a second Hasbro collection. Buying stuff from him. He is one of the most awesome one of the most awesome Hasbro dealers. So he's got like over 1,000 followers on his eBay account. So he's gonna have all of his eyes on his auctions, right? So his stuff, he's gonna be able to sell a ton of figures for a ludicrous amount of money. So let's say I put this figure on auction and I got free shipping, or yeah, I got free shipping on it, and I start to bid at 99 cents. I sell this figure, it might go for $12.50 as an example. But then he takes this exact same figure. He sells it on his site. Let's say he starts it at $10, and he's got let's say he ships it for $10. Again, just an example. He could potentially sell this on auction on his site for $50. Again, it's just based on the selling capabilities, based on years of selling on a platform and how many followers he has, etc. So, reason I make this comparison and why these figures are so frustrating. I value the Nasty Boy figures probably more than your average seller, your average collector. At one point, I had about a mint collection. I've talked about this on the channel plenty, right? And I don't think there's really a need to bring this up again, but this is just what I'm talking about with these particular figures. If you're kind of wanting to know the value of these figures, a couple years ago, these figures were easily selling for anywhere between $75 to $150 on auction. And based on that, yeah, I I put them on a bite now for $75. They were always going off, and pretty much anybody that you saw that was selling these figures, they were selling for $75 plus. So $75 best offer. I would get a ton of views, a lot of people watching it, but no offers. Or if somebody did send an offer, it'd be like $30. I'm like, get the heck out of here! You're insane. But on his account, people would constantly bid on his stuff, and he would get like $150, $160 on auction, and it would blow my mind. I'm like, how? So I say that to say this. That was like 2 years ago when these figures were constantly in the $75, $100 price range, $125 price range, etc. Today, 2024 is not 2022 value. These guys are about $40 nowadays. When I sell these guys on auction, I don't do auction that much. If I were to do a buy it now, I do the same thing for Nasty Boys that I do for Legion of Doom. I pretty much put the bar at like $40, and I charge my buyers like $40 for these guys. So depending on what other sellers are charging, I don't know. If they're trying to get the guys $50, $75, $80, that's on them. I know what I charge. I ask $40 for the pair. Again, I still think they're worth a whole lot more, but but that's it for price though. The figures themselves. I love these freaking guys, man. They are freaking too darn cool. Um, one of the things I was talking about doing, guys, I've been wanting to go out and buy not necessarily mint on card figures, but I've been wanting to find loose bubbles and cards for actual Hasbro cards and bubbles, right? And and I wanted to start getting some actual Hasbro figures. I want to get them customized, and I wanted to get them resealed so that I'd have a new collection for custom figures resealed on actual Hasbro card back, right? And so I wanted to get like, let's say, Nasty Boys. You kind of look at like original San Francisco toy makers, and you got them in black. But then I want to get them in their orange color scheme or their green color scheme. But the thing I don't want to do, I don't want to destroy good figures. I don't want to take a figure that is mint or near mint, or even if it just has like some paint loss, or if it even if you've got a Brian Knobs and let's say his arm was floppy, I, I still don't want to do that to the to the Nasty Boys. These are still good quality, I think, valuable figures. So I have to do it to the right figures, the ones that really aren't that valuable. But man, like I said, so I kind of like this right here because his arm is it is strong, right? But it's not so strong to the point where when he winds up, his arm, it stays straight. So when he winds up, it's kind of like he comes at you with a punch. So I guess sometimes not having that super strong arm is somewhat of a benefit. So that's kind of nice. I like that a little bit. Hasbro, among their figures, I still say the Nasty Boys are top 20 figures. Both are very playable figures, look great, very fun, enjoyable pieces. Quality work all around. Like I said, man, Series 4, keeping in line with Series 3, 1992 was a freaking great year for release for Hasbro. Their run of figures were absolutely amazing. And I don't know, man, just kind of thinking in Series 3 and 4, I don't think they even had a single bad figure. I mean, what? In all honesty, what is the worst figure that they released in among the two series? Texas Tornado, maybe, because he's got the dual arm wind up. Coco Beware and Greg Valentine. I mean, are those really the worst figures that were released? And that was Series 3. So if those are like the worst pieces, I would consider '92 to be a freaking awesome year for the company. So yeah, loving what they did in Series 4. I'm probably going to wait to make a decision as we go through the rest of these series one by one. But so far, I'm still classifying Series 3 as the number one best release of action figures from Hasbro. But as of right now, I'm prepared to say that Series 4 is easily number two. Now, we've only done four series, and I already know that Series 5 is, like I said, Series 5 is terrible in comparison with the amount of figures that they had. Series 5 wasn't good, so out of the first five series, I know that the Series 3 and 4 are easily top two. And Series 6, I know it, yeah, Series 6, I know isn't that good. Series 7, Series 8 will be tough to top because of Yokozuna and another Bret Hart. Another Series 8 might take over. No, I think Series 4 could be the number two best release. So yeah, I think 1992 is the best year, best two series. How about that? Uh, that's it, guys. Um, like I said, only three figures that I had from childhood. This is the last series that I had from childhood. Series 5 onward, I never had any of these figures, so it might pretty much just be a general review from this point forward. But I'm still gonna talk about value and other things as well. So I am gonna add a little bit more input to each of the videos, and we'll still continue going on from there as well. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the video, guys, if you have any interest and you would like to go, further back into the archives, and you want to go back into my playlist, and you want to go through the previous Hasbro review videos, and you want to look through the series 1 through 11 review videos, and you want to look at previous series 12 unreleased video, you want to look at the previous review I did on the prototypes and mailways. I mean, you can. I mean, those were fun videos I enjoyed making, but I am going to make all those videos all over again. So I'm not going to go back and watch them or anything like that, and do any kind of caveats or anything. I'm going to make it all brand new videos. So it's going to be all brand new information or whatever. So, but as always, guys, I appreciate you taking the time out to watch the video. These videos have been doing a whole lot better than I could have ever expected. Even at an hour plus per video. So I really appreciate your time, and this has been a lot of fun for me. Unlike other reviews, I mean, this is actually a line that I actually grew up with, so a lot of personal history for me. So I enjoy these type of videos. And until next week, guys, thanks for watching, and talk to you in the comments. Bye, everybody.